but it's still on the move. The Russians are shooting chaotically in the direction of Ukrainian positions. Artillery uses cluster munitions, which is having an effect. The tank is destroyed. The surviving tanks and APCs are moving forward. This APC was sent first. Let's follow it. That's a Ukrainian artillery hit. The second shot is getting more accurate. The third tank is driving around them, hitting the mines. The Russian armored group moves on. Another column. One of the Russian soldiers fires into the air for some reason. To avoid becoming an easy target for artillery, they're shuttling both ways. There's a lot of them. They're clustered in a large group. These tanks lead the attack. As the drone approaches the field, we see a strip of mines. The first Russian tank is stopped. The second one drives around it and... Ukrainian artillery makes a massive attack on the stopped Russian column. And this looks like a HIMARS strike. While the Ukrainians were distracted by the first assault groups, this column managed to get as close as possible. Under the cover of the smoke, they're moving on. Part of the column is already in the field. They are under massive fire of Ukrainians. FU drones are monitoring the attack from different angles. The first tank goes first, clearing the way from the mines. Just one of these ATGM missiles will bring the Russians a lot of trouble. The Russians are attacking the AFU positions in this wooded area. A hit APC creates a traffic jam, which the Ukrainians take advantage of, and hit the neighboring armored personnel carriers. Nevertheless, the next APCs are moving on. Probably one of them explodes on a mine. Every second, the enemy's equipment is under attack. 2 hits on the APCs at once. One of them explodes. The Russians turn the column around and retreat. The stopped APCs detonate. That was epic, but I've got something else interesting for you. The rest of the column is moving away. The second wave of Russian armored vehicles are on their way to continue the attack. The tactic of attacking in waves could be effective, but not in today's realities. An FPV drone dives into the tank. Here's how it looks from another angle. The APC continues to drive forward. But the whole field is littered with mines. It hits one of them. The APC is destroyed. Another group. The mine barriers are working perfectly. The assault has been stopped. Several dozen Russian tanks and APCs were destroyed in this attack. These tanks and armored personnel carriers couldn't even cross the forest belt. One of the tanks was destroyed in the retreat. So was this APC. And now I want to show you this attack. Russian tanks moved out to reinforce the advancing group. There are 2 tanks and 3 APCs in the column. Ukrainians prepared a surprise for them. The tank hits mines. It manages to stop. The column starts to turn around. An APC backs up and hits a mine. That vehicle is attacked by an FPV drone. The surviving tank turns around and drives away. The enemy is not getting anywhere. It's a failure. The Russians have 2 APCs left. Will he be able to get past the mines? It was a mistake. And now this place is turning into a graveyard of Russian armored vehicles. The Russians are making a crazy move, which is to be expected. All armored vehicles destroyed. Russians are preparing for an assault. APCs with infantry and tanks are moving to the task. The first to go is a tank. They are already in the field. The tank attacks the positions of the AFU. A mine barrage interrupts the advance. The APCs are starting to move back. This footage clearly shows the mine line. Waiting for the next order, the column stops. The Ukrainians take advantage of this. They hit 2 more targets. The retreat isn't going according to the Russians' plan either. The attack ends with a spectacular explosion. The assault has failed. A column of 3 APCs and a tank is considered an armored group. The 3rd APC in the column is attacked. The column does not stop. The tanks are moving on. They can't accomplish their mission. So they attack the positions of the AFU and retreat. The assault failed. And this is the story of how the Russians lost 2 tanks and 2 APCs. The first loss happens even before the Russians enter the battle. And this is a Russian tank exploding on mines. But the Russians continue their offensive. The APC is actively firing towards the AFU positions. After suffering losses, they decide to retreat. The Russian tank is engulfed in flames and begins to detonate. The shells, one by one, are tearing the tank from the inside. While retreating, the tank explodes on the mines. The APC repeats the mistake. The Ukrainians attack the immobilized APC. And the tank stopped by mines detonates. Now pay attention to this attack. This assault will be remembered by the enemy for a long time. 2 APCs are storming Ukrainian positions. This APC is continuously firing at the Ukrainian armed forces, while the second one is advancing. And then the FPV drone arrives. It calms the Russian APC. Cluster munitions fall from the sky onto the enemy's heads. This APC is driving straight into the mines. The second Ukrainian drone is already in the sky. It's a good time to attack. The APC bursts into flames. The flames reach the ammunition. And the APC turns into a cloud of fire. Nothing remains of it. The Russians are moving in for the assault. Armor-clad tanks and APCs ride into battle. Ukrainian FPV drones attack a column of enemy armored vehicles. This yields its results. The first APC is ignited after a grenade explosion. The drone attacks the second APC, abandoned by the Russians. The last two targets. The Ukrainians waited for the right moment and quickly launched a massive strike from multiple directions. Each operator locked onto a specific target in the column and precisely attacked the enemy. Two Russian APCs attempt to maneuver to evade the attack, but unsuccessfully. A precise drone strike halts the first armored vehicle in the group, forcing the Russian soldiers to flee quickly into the tree line. The crew of the second APC is also preparing to flee, and that's the right decision. This vehicle, too, has already been targeted by another drone operator. Give a thumbs up to the skill and bravery of Ukrainian FPV pilots for their outstanding work. They began destroying Russian vehicles one by one. Some were only immobilized, but others were taken out with a single strike. Sometimes it's hard to believe that just one kamikaze drone can cause such a colossal explosion. Over the past year, the Russians have been installing additional anti-drone armor on nearly all tanks and APCs involved in assaults. These types of armor lack any standardization and are sometimes quite bizarre. For instance, this time we can see them using ordinary rubber as a shield. We can only wonder what the Russians were hoping for when they tried to protect their equipment with flammable materials. As proof that this was a poor idea, we can clearly see how the drone effortlessly burns through this defense using thermite. The rubber quickly burns away, even aiding the fire in spreading across the hull. Of all the materials that could be used to reinforce armor, this is probably one of the worst choices. As soon as the first units of equipment were destroyed, the surviving Russian soldiers panicked and immediately fled to the nearest forest, abandoning the other armored vehicle to its fate. The Ukrainians were waiting for just that, as abandoned equipment can be destroyed with airdropped explosives without wasting kamikaze drones. The drone pilot carefully places the explosives and flies to a safe distance, watching as the armor spectacularly shatters into pieces. After the first explosion, the drone makes another drop to ensure the complete destruction of the vehicle. While this APC is burning, the other Russians from the convoy quickly realized that they were not welcome and attempted to escape further. But the FPV drone is much faster than the tank. And there was no need to chase this tank. The Russians abandoned it right in the most visible spot. This allowed the pilot to fly straight into the tank and inflict maximum damage. At first, the damage seemed minor, but over time, the flames engulfed the entire hull and gradually began to reach the fuel tank and ammunition. And within just a few minutes, we can see the result. The turret of this tank flew so high that the operator had to raise the camera to capture it. And in slow motion, we can clearly see this spectacular moment. Despite the fact that these APCs withstood more hits than the previous ones, in the end, the Russians had no choice but to abandon them, leaving them to burn on the battlefield. Due to the FPV drone managing to fly directly inside the APC, the fire instantly engulfed. Didn't wait for it to burn out on its own and finished it off with another precise shot. Give a thumbs up to the Ukrainian warriors for their skillful defense of their positions. When destroying these two tanks, the Ukrainians showcased true piloting skill. One drone hits a tank, but it continues to move. Another drone takes down its companion. This tank is destroyed. But what should the other drone do, which was also headed for the same target? To avoid accidentally hitting the already destroyed enemy, the operator changes course at the last moment, flying straight through the flames and switching to another tank. The pilot sees that the second tank has also been hit. Therefore, he heads straight for the target and finishes it off for good. Only 2 units of Russian equipment survived the massive assault, but their lives were not destined to last long. Already damaged and engulfed in flames, they still tried to escape their fate, but unsuccessfully. The crew of this armored vehicle stopped to assess the battlefield, but their timing was unfortunate. This APC couldn't be breached by the drone, but instead, it managed to hit the least protected spot near the turret. This strike wasn't enough to destroy the vehicle, but it was certainly enough to disable its machine gun and completely neutralize this enemy. Unfortunately, most equipment is still reinforced with iron plates, which significantly complicates the work of Ukrainian kamikaze drone operators. However, if the pilot is a true professional, even such defenses will not be an obstacle. On another section of the front, the Russians slightly changed their tactics, advancing not in a single column, but in several smaller groups. They managed to get quite close to Ukrainian fortifications and began shelling them. The closer the enemy, the more dangerous they become, but at the same time, they're easier to hit, like with a javelin, for instance. The enemy's vehicles are advancing from multiple directions, but the Ukrainians have several excellent ambush positions. This is their land, and they know every square meter of it like the back of their hand. Despite the Ukrainian resistance, the enemy continues their advance, relentlessly trying to seize this position. 2 Russian tanks have nearly reached the settlement, while several more tanks and APCs attempt to flank the Ukrainian positions from the side. But the Russian forces are not infinite, and the defenders have no intention of retreating. Gradually, the Ukrainians manage to seize the right moments, taking out one tank, then another, and another. The Russians did not expect it to be so difficult to break through this defense, just as this soldier from the T-90 crew didn't anticipate his service would end so abruptly. And then, the artillery joins the fight to lend its support. After that, the confidence of the Russians in the success of their assault gradually begins to waver, and some of them start to realize what truly awaits them next. His APC has already experienced Ukrainian hospitality and tried to turn around to escape, but it was too late. The crew of this one panicked completely, lost control, and ended up veering off the road into a ditch. Such a prime target couldn't go unnoticed, and it didn't take long for the drone operator to react. Just a couple of kamikaze drones and this formidable war machine was reduced to nothing more than a heap of scrap metal. This crew also failed to escape from the FPV drone. The Russian army's assault, which had started so confidently, turned into yet another graveyard of abandoned and destroyed vehicles. Dozens of enemy armored vehicles and tanks were destroyed due to overconfidence and poor coordination in the offensive. They overestimated their strength and abilities, and paid the price for it. Knowing how it all ended for this group, the Russians will think twice before attempting an advance in this direction next time. And those who survived this battle will remember for the rest of their lives how they were repelled. After the failed assault, a small group of Russian soldiers still hoped they could escape retribution for their crimes. They brought up a vehicle and tried to evacuate the wounded. They even tried to shoot at the drones, but this time, luck was not on their side. And as soon as all the Russians were in the vehicle, the Ukrainian FPV pilot skillfully completed the task, sending them a one-way ticket to hell. In another sector, the Russians also attempted an offensive using 3 APCs and 1 tank. From the very first moments, things did not go according to plan. First, the tank fell behind the group after getting stuck in the mud. Immediately after that, they came under heavy fire from Ukrainian artillery. It was positioned quite far away, but that didn't stop the Ukrainians from destroying the APC with a precise strike from a distance of about 10 kilometers. And within a few minutes, kamikaze drone operators took over, relentlessly pressuring the enemy with continuous attacks. The Russians don't stop. The drone is heading for another target. Second attempt. The Russians really want to break through this line. They're launching defensive cover to evade the Ukrainian ATGMs. They must be very afraid of them. But it's not working. A missile strikes the Russian armored vehicles. One of the APCs is moving on. The drone is attacking it. It's destroyed. The Russians are retreating. They're throwing out heat traps for cover. But that can't stop the FPV drone. The APC is under attack. The drone makes a final attack. It's eliminated. The Russians aren't stopping there. They try to break through where other APCs have just been destroyed. Not successful. The drone starts dropping grenades.
I can't feel no better.
The assault has failed. FPV drones are attacking the stopped APCs. Look how carefully and wisely the Ukrainian operator does this. Yes, he directs the drone into a split in the armor of the APC. The damaged Russian armored vehicles are engulfed in flames. Another defeat. Let's take a look at this massive attack. We see Russian vehicles heading towards Ukrainian positions. The assault is underway. A Ukrainian soldier takes aim at a Russian tank and fires a missile. Boom! The tank burst into flames. A second shot is fired from the javelin. The tank turns into a cloud of fire. Third missile is in the air. The missile travels a long distance and hits the target accurately. This APC is trying to escape. The drone is carefully tracking it. It is hit by an RPG missile. The APC is instantly ignited. This tank isn't trying to escape. It's firing back. The AFU says hello to it. The missile doesn't stop it, but it does make it retreat. Powerful detonation. The tank's turret goes into the sky. Another massive tank attack. 2 armored groups, 2 tanks and 6 APCs. Their problems start right at the beginning. One of the tanks crashes into the second tank, thereby immobilizing it. The Russians are forced to abandon it. It's driven off so it doesn't interfere with the traffic. The Ukrainians are using all possible weapons of mass destruction, and here's the first result. The tank managed to pass through, but the APC was blown up by a mine. The second APC is trapped. After traveling a little farther, the tank also explodes on a mine. Ukrainians attack the abandoned armored vehicles. The drone strikes the tank. And now the APC. And another one. Here comes the tank the Russians lost at the beginning of the assault. The second drone reaches its target. The ammunition ignites. And here's the result. The Russians lost all of their armored vehicles involved in this attack. That attack is complete. But pay attention to this one. A tank, 2 APCs, a tank, and another APC. That's how the Russians are advancing. Reconnaissance is transmitting detailed information about each target. For some reason, the column stops. One of the APCs trying to back up crashes into another. It all looks like panic. It's clear the Russians are confused and fleeing. And here's the reason. The tank is stuck in the crater from the explosion. One of the APCs has been hit. The second one is abandoned and rolling towards the Ukrainians, so the Russians want to buy some time. The assault has failed. The Ukrainians are removing the abandoned vehicles. Wooden defense didn't help, and the APC is destroyed by flames. And now I'm going to show you something interesting. The storming of these AFU positions was of great importance to the Russians. At least 6 units of equipment. The AFU are actively using artillery. And this very much resembles a shot from an ATGM. The enemy's 6 units of armored vehicles continue to advance. The shells and missiles explode without reaching the target. This direct hit on the APC doesn't stop it. Another direct missile hit without any result. One of the tanks was blown up by mines. The tank is stopped. The Russians continue their attack. 1 tank and 3 APCs remain in working condition. And here are the Ukrainian positions. The enemy's vehicles are getting closer. The landing of enemy infantry begins. Soldiers are going down into the trench. It's hard to say whether the landing point is right or wrong. Now the enemy soldiers are between 2 groups of Ukrainians. Ukrainians keep attacking the armored vehicles. Unfortunately, the ATGM missile misses. But there is a surprise ahead for this tank. The 2 tanks have been stopped by mines. The Russians, realizing that the first group of paratroopers is already in position, and sending reinforcements. A tank and 3 APCs. The last APC in the group manages to stop. The Ukrainians, who are being assaulted by enemy infantry, find an opportunity to attack the advancing APCs. The second group of Russian soldiers are dropped a little further away, to increase the area they control. Unfortunately, the Ukrainians didn't have enough modern ATGMs like the Javelin to stop this assault early. The Russians, after dropping off the infantry, retreated. The Ukrainians managed to destroy the enemy infantry and hold the position, but if they had more modern weapons, the losses as well as the risk would have been less. The Russians made several more attempts to seize these positions. This lone Russian APC has been given an impossible task. It must deliver infantry to the Ukrainian positions. The ATGM missile hits the target. This single hit is sufficient. The APC becomes uncontrollable. "40 minutes later, a second vehicle arrives. A Russian APC stops after being hit by anti-tank mines. It was fully protected from all sides, but not against landmines. This is what a Russian assault turns into when the Ukrainians have enough weapons. These two APCs decided to cross the field. Suddenly this happens. A Javelin missile hits one of them. That doesn't stop the second APC. It's confidently moving forward. And there's another hit. The second Javelin missile reaches its target. Another FPV drone crashes into the APC, followed by an RPG missile that fails to detonate. A moment later, another Javelin comes from above. One more FPV. And that's how every attack in which the AFU has enough weapons is stopped. It's a dangerous idea to drive so openly across a field. Ukrainians are using Javelin. The second APC tries to break through, but is met by Ukrainian FPV. One armored personnel carrier is blown to pieces. The second is damaged and abandoned. Two desperate Russian APCs attack Ukrainian positions. Ukrainians engage FPV drones. A Ukrainian drone can be clearly seen in the replay. The APC is stopping. This one has decided to retreat. But the Ukrainian drone is already circling above it. The drone attacks. We can see the attacking drone in the sky. That attack is complete. Let's take a look with you at the Frankenstein tank attack. A Russian armored column headed by such a tank is going to the assault. Ukrainians are actively using artillery and FPV drones. There's a direct hit. APC destroyed. So is this one. Tank and APC moving on. Drone attacks the tank. The driver loses control and the tank falls into an anti-tank ditch. The Ukrainians use the FPV drone to kill the tank, futilely attempting to shoot it down with rifle fire. A group of Ukrainian soldiers maneuvers from the opposite side of the tree line, attempting to encircle the Russians from multiple directions. The tank keeps advancing as one group maneuvers around the opposite side of the tree line, while another follows behind the vehicle, providing cover with small arms fire. Look at the intense firepower unleashed by the tank. The Russians in the trenches can't even lift their heads for a few seconds. The group has already moved in close to the Russian positions, bringing them under complete fire control and nearly encircling them. Another APC arrives to provide support. From here, the Ukrainian infantry takes over, firmly establishing control over this sector. This Ukrainian tank, operating without infantry support, embarked on a solo mission to deliver a powerful strike against Russian fortifications in this tree line. The tank spares no ammunition, delivering strike after strike. However, its shells are not unlimited, so it begins to retreat while continuing to bombard the Russian positions. Suddenly, the Russians deploy a drone, and unfortunately, it's not just one. The first strike does not cause critical damage, so the tank continues to retreat while maintaining fire. The drones continue striking the tank. It endures several more hits, but the reactive armor has already served its purpose and is unlikely to withstand further impacts from the RPG warheads carried by the drones. Realizing this, the crew decides to abandon the vehicle. Look closely. The tank is already smoking, and the final drone strike renders it completely immobile. If you look closely, hiding beneath this so-called anti-drone grille is an old Soviet T-72. This tank has significant vulnerabilities for its crew, making it far less effective in modern combat. This is precisely why Ukrainian forces are eagerly mastering and transitioning to Western models like the Abrams and Leopard. So, hit that like button if you want to see more support and Western technology for the Ukrainian military, and if you believe that delaying assistance harms not only Ukraine but democracy as a whole. A striking example is this Leopard tank. It charges onto the battlefield with precision, targeting enemy positions. Most importantly, after successfully completing its mission, the tank leaves the area intact and unscathed. Russian forces were amassing offensive potential, preparing for another attack. This activity was clearly recorded by a reconnaissance drone. A decision was made to act preemptively. Thick fog covered the area, preventing enemy infantry from noticing how a Ukrainian T-72 tank crept almost right up to their positions. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. The Ukrainian tank reached a position just 20 meters from the Russian lines and began obliterating them with powerful shots. Just look at these shots. Thanks to the high-quality drone camera, they resemble scenes straight out of a Hollywood movie. But sadly, this is no fiction. It's the harsh reality brought by the Russians who invaded foreign soil. The tank completes its mission and, returning to the fog from which it emerged, disappears from the battlefield. Two Ukrainian T-72 tanks advance to assault Russian positions. An IFV carrying infantry follows closely behind as part of the operation. A Russian soldier hears the rumble of machinery and rushes to the trenches to warn his group, which is holding the defensive line. Notice that the trench, about 10 meters long, is located right on the open terrain. The IFV stays behind as the two tanks pass through one grove and head toward another, where Russian forces are stationed. Enemy artillery opens fire. The tanks split up, take their positions, and open fire. Behind one of the tanks, an explosion is heard. If you look closely, you can spot a Russian soldier firing an anti-tank missile, but missing the target. This failed shot only infuriates the Ukrainian tank crew even more, and they begin advancing straight toward the trenches, continuing to fire intensively. The tank closes in, and its fire leaves the Russians no chance to counter. It moves as close as possible and continues to bombard the positions with shells. Eventually, the tank begins to run out of shells. At this point, the Russian soldiers might have sighed with relief, but unexpectedly, instead of retreating, the tank starts driving over the trench, burying it under its weight. Afterward, the tank retreats slightly, providing cover for the Ukrainian assault group that arrived on an IFV to complete the mission and solidify their hold on the positions. From the industrial zone of the factory under Russian control, a group of vehicles advances to assault Ukrainian positions. 4 lightly armored infantry vehicles spread out in a line and move into open terrain. Ukrainian artillery opens fire. But the shells land nearby, failing to inflict direct hits on the vehicles. Suddenly, the leading IFV sharply changes course, veering off the road onto an open field. This was a spontaneous and highly risky decision, as the field could have been mined. However, it appears this section was left unmined, catching the Ukrainian forces by surprise. The Russian vehicle was now almost at the Ukrainian positions. At the same time, a kamikaze drone is in pursuit of another IFV. Look at how close an artillery shell landed to it, just a near miss. Yet, the drone doesn't relent, relentlessly chasing the vehicle, which the Russians had fortified with additional defenses before the assault. Just before the strike, it's clear they even constructed a shield from wooden logs, hoping to bolster its protection. After the impact, the crew abandons the vehicle and hastily flees. The Russians retreat so quickly that they even forget to close the doors behind them, significantly simplifying the task for the next drone. Let's return to the first IFV, which has already deployed its troops. Ukrainian soldiers, taking a favorable position on higher ground, strike at the vehicle. Take a closer look. You can see one of the Ukrainian soldiers making a precise shot with an RPG. A group of about 10 soldiers hastily retreats to the nearest greenery. Meanwhile, abandoned equipment is finished off with precise drone strikes. This IFV didn't even manage to leave the industrial zone before being destroyed almost immediately. Another infantry fighting vehicle does manage to push forward. But notice, the infantry flees, realizing the assault has failed. Despite this, the driver stubbornly continues moving under artillery fire, retracing almost the exact route across the open field. The driver manages to reach the designated point, but upon seeing that the previous IFV has already been destroyed, decides to bypass it and keep moving. However, his advance is short-lived. The vehicle is promptly struck by a precise RPG shot from a Ukrainian soldier. Look at the open doors. The infantry had long since abandoned the IFV, scattering in all directions. Left alone, the panicked and disoriented driver continued moving forward. However, this only worsened his situation. Kamikaze drones began targeting the vehicle. The IFV sustained damage, thick smoke billowing from it, A series of precise explosive drops from the drones ultimately rendered the vehicle immobile. The driver fled and, in desperation, took shelter in a Ukrainian trench. Fortunately for him, he survived, and eventually, Ukrainian forces captured him as a prisoner. This video shows a successful attack by Ukrainian forces, during which they managed to capture Russian fortified positions. The Russians dug in these trenches but soon ran out of ammunition. The Ukrainian forces quickly decided to seize the opportunity to attack them. The Ukrainians used at least 3 Soviet-made tanks and 5 armored vehicles to transport infantry. Notice that there is only 1 tank on the Russian side, and it seems to be confused. Perhaps the Russians decided that they had no chance of repelling the attack of the superior Ukrainian forces and decided to retreat. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian tanks are suppressing the remnants of the resistance from the Russian fighters in the trenches. After this, the Ukrainian infantry began to disembark and approach the trenches. The Ukrainian soldiers bravely entered the enemy trenches and captured them without any losses. This place will now serve as a foothold for future Ukrainian attacks. But do you remember the Russian tank that was covering the Russian soldiers? The tank crew decided not to engage in the fight and quietly retreated, firing various munitions in all directions. And now, HIMARS is firing its missile, which is about to hit a camouflaged ammunition depot. The explosion will be incredibly spectacular, beautiful, and terrifying at the same time, like tons of New Year's fireworks going off all at once. And this is a clear example of how Russian arsenals have been depleted over the course of the fighting. Ukrainian forces have already struck numerous warehouses and arsenals, destroying a significant amount of weaponry. This deals a heavy blow to the Russians, who use these munitions to bomb civilian cities. This isn't just one explosion. It's a massive detonation, resembling a nuclear blast from the movies. The arsenal turns into a giant fireball, rising into the sky and lighting up everything around it. This is the result of an ATAC mess strike by the Ukrainians. Strong tremors, fire, and smoke engulf the area, with tall columns of smoke visible from a distance, marking the destruction. Explosions go off one after another, covering more and more space. Everything that was in the warehouse is sent flying. Shrapnel, metal debris, burning fragments. The ground literally shakes from the force of the blasts, ripping up asphalt and creating deep craters. The scene is both terrifying and mesmerizing, the sky aflame with the sound of explosions like an endless storm. Next into the fight comes a Su-27 fighter jet, carrying a JDAM-guided bomb. It releases the bomb onto a building where Russian military supplies were stored. The mission is clear. Destroy the building where, according to intelligence, the enemy's most crucial military supplies are stored. The Su-27 maneuvers at altitude, getting closer to the target. The JDAM bomb's navigation system is already set to the target coordinates. Its GPS guidance ensures a precise strike, regardless of any attempts to evade or camouflage the target. The bomb penetrates the building, consuming everything around it. When it hits its target, the ground trembles from the powerful explosion. Metal, concrete, and stone fly in all directions, creating a cloud of ash and debris. In this video, a drone approaches hangars that, according to intelligence, contained an incredible amount of explosives. The drone swiftly drops its payload and rapidly gains altitude to avoid being hit. Just look at this tremendously powerful explosion. A towering plume of smoke rises rapidly, visible from a great distance. And these are the aftermaths. The ground around looks scorched. And here, a drone drops a payload onto an enemy ammunition depot hidden among trees. Unlike in the previous video, this drone didn't manage to retreat to a safe distance and was caught in the powerful explosion. This can be seen from the camera of a second drone flying higher up, capturing the moment in dramatic detail. Ammunition depots are vital links in the logistical chain. Destroying such facilities limits Russian forces' access to munitions, significantly slowing their actions on the front line, reducing the intensity of artillery shelling, and restricting their ability to launch offensive operations. And here we have a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone tasked with gathering intel on an enemy depot. The SA-15 Gauntlet tried to shoot it down, but missed. The drone dodged the missile like Neo from The Matrix, an incredible moment caught on camera. Shortly after, the drone guided a HIMARS strike that destroyed both the depot and itself in the process. Mission accomplished. The Russian ammunition depot, camouflaged among the hills, became the target of a precise strike from a 120mm mortar. The explosion was instantaneous, and one by one, the TM-62 anti-tank mines, stored in large quantities, began to detonate. Here are more consequences of a successful strike on a Russian warehouse. The video's author likely didn't expect such a powerful explosion. The tank commander aims the gun. They also complicate the work of Russia's logistics and support services. Ammunition depots are a top priority target because destroying a single base can take thousands of shells or missiles out of commission. This creates shortages that are difficult to address under sanctions and with limited resources. The loss of a depot can be more damaging to an army's combat capabilities than the destruction of equipment, which is useless without ammunition. In this video, you can see a self-propelled artillery unit in action. With a precise strike, it hits a hangar storing ammunition, which quickly catches fire and starts to explode. And here's a Russian soldier who tried to hide, but a kamikaze drone ruined all his plans. The drone sped into the building, which exploded due to the munitions stored inside. And here, you can see the aftermath of a strike on a facility that once stored something important. Now it's nothing but ruins. Over here is a pile of anti-tank mines, likely abandoned by retreating Russian forces, which went up in a spectacular explosion. Why do Ukrainian forces target such sites? Ammunition plays a critical role in modern warfare, and depots are the backbone that supplies the front with everything it needs. Destroying an arsenal has serious consequences for the enemy's army. Without sufficient stockpiles of shells, artillery becomes ineffective, missiles fail to reach their targets, and offensive operations risk being disrupted. The destruction of these facilities also has a strategic impact. Under sanctions, Russia faces significant limitations in producing modern munitions. Old stockpiles are running out, and quickly replenishing them is nearly impossible. As a result, even a single destroyed depot can have a lasting effect on the enemy's ability to sustain combat operations. Field depots, unlike stationary arsenals, are often set up near frontline positions and can be quickly relocated if necessary. They can be deployed in hidden locations, such as forests, mountainous areas, or underground facilities, to make it harder for the enemy to detect them. Stealth and mobility are key advantages of field depots, as they help avoid strikes from enemy aircraft and artillery. Just look at those flames. It's like a fire-breathing dragon come to life. Despite all the security measures in place, field depots remain vulnerable to attacks, especially when located in combat zones. Imagine a situation like this. On the front line, where the army is preparing for an offensive, a field ammunition depot is hidden among trees or in an old abandoned building. It is camouflaged as a natural object to make it difficult to detect from the air or ground. The surroundings are quiet, but this is just a temporary illusion of safety. There are several key threats that can destroy this depot at any moment. One of the most dangerous is airstrikes and artillery bombardments. When shells fall nearby or an aerial missile hits the depot, the munitions inside explode, and everything around is engulfed in fire. This can lead to massive losses and completely destroy the depot, depriving the army of vital resources. But there is also a more insidious risk. Saboteurs may attack the depot at night, attempting to capture or destroy it, leaving the army without supplies at a critical moment. Even overloading the depot, when there are too many munitions for proper storage and accounting, can become an issue. This makes the depot even more vulnerable, and the risks increase. To minimize these threats, field depots are often camouflaged as forest areas or old buildings. For added protection, concrete shelters, barriers, and other structures are used. However, despite all efforts, the depot remains vulnerable and can become the enemy's target at any moment. It's a dangerous game, where even the smallest mistakes can lead to catastrophic consequences. Destroying large arsenals also impacts long-term war strategies. In the fight against Russian tanks and armored vehicles, anti-tank guided missiles are one of the key weapons. ATGMs have changed the game. In the past, fighting tanks required other tanks or aircraft, but now a single mobile system can keep an entire army at bay. An anti-tank missile system, anti-tank mines, artillery, and unmanned aerial vehicles are four powerful elements that together form an impenetrable shield against armored vehicles. In this video, we see 7 armored vehicles heading out for their final assault. The reconnaissance drone transmits data to the operator of the ATGM system. The soldier has identified the target. His first victim is the tank leading the convoy. This is how a missile costing $20,000 destroys a tank worth around $500,000 and turns it into a pile of burning scrap metal. The Russians are well aware of the power and threat of the Skeef. That's why they actively hunt it. In turn, the Ukrainians effectively camouflage the Skeef and even create decoy targets. Here's another interesting case. The crew of a T-72 tank decided to break through the Ukrainian army's defense on their own and open a path for further advancement. The Ukrainians meet him with heavy artillery fire, but by some miracle, he manages to advance forward unharmed. Without hitting a single anti-tank mine, the tank gets closer, all the while firing at Ukrainian positions. There are just under 5 kilometers to the nearest trenches, but the tank is already in the sights of the skiff operator. This is where his luck runs out. The missile of this anti-tank missile system easily covers such a distance and hits its target. Just look at the professionalism demonstrated by the Ukrainian soldiers. With the first shot, they stop the tank and finish it off using an FPV drone. And this is the work of another equally well-known anti-tank missile system of Ukrainian production, called the AT-4 Spigot. The missile is equipped with a fragmentation high explosive warhead, capable of penetrating the armor of tanks and other armored vehicles at a range of up to 3 kilometers. Here are the footage of the successful destruction of a Russian tank convoy on a strategically important road for the Ukrainians. Working in tandem with the FPV drone operator, the soldier, with his AT-4 Spigot, takes up a strategic position on a hill and begins to knock out enemy vehicles as if in a shooting range. You might have noticed that the launcher operator aims the sight not directly at the target, but slightly above it. Do you know why he does this? The reason is that when the missile is launched from the container, and before its engine activates, it is affected by Earth's gravitational pull. And this attempt at an enemy tank assault ended in failure. From a bird's eye view, the reconnaissance drone operator tracks moving targets. There's no room for mistakes here. Every detail, every movement of the convoy is relayed in real time. The operator relays the coordinates to the TOW missile system crew. This weapon is capable of hitting targets at long distances with surgical precision. TOW is a semi-automatic anti-tank missile system developed in the United States. The feature of this anti-tank missile system is that the shooter guides the missile to the target using wires, which ensures the reliability and accuracy of the strike. The missile reaches the target and detonates, using a shaped charge warhead capable of penetrating up to 900 millimeters of armor. The operator locks onto the target. It's a tank moving across open terrain. With the second shot, the missile disables the tank. The TOW missile weighs 93 kilograms. To make it more mobile, the system is also mounted on the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. This significantly increases its firepower against enemy armored vehicles. You've probably already seen these striking shots from the Kursk region, where the brave Bradley crew breaks through the enemy's defenses. But few know that the missile fired in this video is none other than the TOW anti-tank missile system. Impressive power. Intelligence reported that an enemy tank convoy has begun moving toward the forest area. Ukrainian forces armed with the French MILAN anti-tank missile system set up an ambush. The crew quietly took up a position, waited for the targets to appear, and attacked them from a short distance, where accuracy is at its peak. One of the tanks manages to escape the trap, but the Ukrainians are not about to let it go. They chase it down with a drone and finish the job. The Milan is a compact, effective, and relatively easy-to-use anti-tank missile system. It was developed through the joint efforts of France and Germany. It has proven highly effective against tanks, armored vehicles, bunkers, and fortifications. The Milan also shares several similarities with the Ukrainian AT-4 Spigot anti-tank missile system. Both are capable of operating in any conditions. They use semi-automatic guidance with optical tracking, meaning the operator keeps the target centered in the sight, while the system automatically adjusts the missile's trajectory. Communication between the missile and the launcher is maintained via wires. These systems also use missiles with shaped charge warheads, designed to penetrate armored vehicles, including those with reactive armor. Although the RPG does not have the same power and range as anti-tank missiles, it plays a key role in combating armored vehicles. Just take a look at what the Russian command came up with. They filled a tank with explosives and sent it straight into the Ukrainian trenches. The Ukrainians greeted this gift with 2 RPG shots. A powerful explosion shook everything in the vicinity. Not far from this spot, another tank stopped in the middle of a field and became an excellent target for the Swedish RPG called the M3 Carl Gustaf. And this video shows how an infantry fighting vehicle and a tank decided to storm an entire village. But they don't realize that Ukrainian defenders are waiting for them. A soldier hides in one of the houses with an RPG-7, waiting for the tank to pass by, and then fires directly at its tracks. When a tank advances on infantry, with its heavy weaponry and thick armor, fear could paralyze anyone. But not the Ukrainian soldiers. They know Every shot is a chance to survive, a chance to stop the enemy. And of course, I couldn't miss showing you the two most famous and beloved anti-tank missile systems of the Ukrainians, the Javelin and NLAW. The British NLAW anti-tank missile system weighs only about 12 kilograms and can be used by a single person, making it highly mobile and convenient for fast-moving units. The missile uses the top attack principle. It first flies toward the target, then homes in on it, ensuring accurate hits even if the tank tries to maneuver. When the missile locks onto its target, it penetrates the tank's armor, creating a powerful explosion inside that destroys the interior of the vehicle. Here, a Ukrainian soldier, in complete darkness, approached from behind the tank and hit its vulnerable rear section with an NLAW missile. The explosion of the tank illuminated the entire area. Here's another case where an infantryman, spotting a target on the other side of the field, didn't hesitate, took his NLAW, and struck the enemy tank. What was once a formidable weapon is now a blazing heap of metal. Compact and lightweight, the NLAW allows an infantryman to discreetly take up a position in cover, whether it's a destroyed house, a basement, or even a rooftop. In this video, we see a convoy of 6 combat vehicles advancing, ready for an assault. But Ukrainian soldiers are already prepared to disappoint them. In their hands is a weapon designed to destroy armored vehicles with maximum precision. It's called the Javelin. A single precise shot can change the course of a battle and give the advantage to those defending their land. Soldiers appreciate it because it uses infrared homing, allowing the missile to strike the target with maximum accuracy. And the operator doesn't have to guide the missile all the way to the target. Here's another interesting moment when the shooter couldn't even see the target, but only noticed some smoke in the distance and decided to launch a missile on a top-down trajectory. Imagine his surprise when he hit a tank worth $1 million.